Absolutely. So some years ago, Senate Bill, what's known as Senate Bill 181, was passed by the Colorado legislature, clarifying that this commission retains the sole authority to adopt water quality classifications and standards for all state waters in Colorado. And so that includes obviously surface water, but also groundwater. But also was recognizing the authority of other agencies that work with industries throughout the state in groundwater discharges and water quality impacts. And so establishing a relationship between this commission and those implementing agencies as they're known. So there are 5 of them, and all 5 of them have submitted an annual report to you as required by statute. And then we do annual, each year those agencies do also provide this briefing. And throughout the year, there are some coordination meetings so that there's ongoing consultation between those agencies, this commission, and your division staff.
Thank you. Any questions before we proceed? Okay, first we have representatives from the department's Oil and Public Safety Division. So you should have a green light on your microphone if it's activated. There you go.
Good morning. My name is Rob Herbert, and I am the remediation supervisor for the OPS Petroleum program. I'm here on behalf of Mahesh Albuquerque, who is out of town on business and could not be here. Also with me is Greg Johnson, to the right here, the current public safety program manager and the former petroleum program manager of OPS, and also Tom Fox, the technical lead of the remediation section. Okay.
Is it on? Yeah. Sure.
There we go.
There we go.
So in addition to the petroleum program, OPS is charged with administering the public safety program, which includes regulating amusement rides and devices, commercial boilers, elevators, and escalators, and those are permitted, who are permitted to use high explosives. In addition, last year, Senate Bill 167 created the Underground Damage Prevention Safety Commission to be housed in OPS for increased enforcement of the 811 program. There we go. So this slide just shows an overview of the update I'm going to provide, starting out with petroleum program summary statistics for 2017 and 2018, then release prevention accomplishments, remediation accomplishments, and then goals for 2019. Could you just do, yeah, thanks. So the summary statistics for 2018 are very similar to 2017 with a few exceptions. The number of inspections and the percent of facilities in compliance is lower than last year, and this is because of the new inspection program that targets high-risk facilities that have older tank systems. The total number of open releases was 613. Let me just say the 2017 statistics are in parentheses after the 2018 statistics. The total number of open releases is 613, which is down from 639 last year. And this is primarily due to the implementation of our Tier 3 and Tier 4 closure criteria. There was an increase in the number of confirmed releases from 155 to 240. And this was in response to the compliance incentive program that was implemented to upgrade spill prevention equipment. And as a result, the number of no further action letters has decreased. However, even at this decreased number of closures, we received kudos from the EPA Region 8 Administrator recently at our end of year meeting for closing 57% of the entire region's closure goal, which is 400. Next. Here you go. So one of the compliance or release prevention accomplishments was revising the regulations, the petroleum storage tank regulations in 2017 to comply with the new EPA regulations for spill prevention equipment testing that will become effective January 2020. The primary changes are listed in the second bullet, which will require 3-year spill prevention equipment testing, 3-year overfill prevention equipment inspections, 3-year containment sump testing for sumps that are used for piping interstitial monitoring, and annual release detection equipment testing. Also, we're in the process of revising our regulations to enhance the tanks installer and service technician certifications, and also to provide reimbursement of costs for tank removals. So the anticipated outcome of these new rule changes is going to be potentially hundreds of new releases. And that is because 2,800 sites will need to have spill bucket testing performed, which will result in failures and the discovery of releases. And 900 sites will need secondary containment testing, which also is expected to result in a lot of failures and just a number of new releases.
Do you mind if I interrupt with a question?
No.
While you're there, it seems like an awful high level of failure for systems that should be engineered to prevent spills and leakage. Why is that? Is it poor installation, poor storage, poor design, or is it that they sit not used for so long that the land shifts and you have roots penetrating?
No, the real reason is that they're upgrading these systems, and when they're replacing the old equipment with new equipment, they're going to likely find contamination that had been previously undetected. So it's just during the upgrades, they're going to discover releases that will need to be addressed.
Thank you.
In an effort to encourage early system upgrades ahead of the EPA rule change in 2020, OPS implemented the 2017 Compliance Incentives Program, which was extended through 2018. The financial incentive to tank owners is to have the $10,000 deductible requirement waived for stepping up and doing their upgrades ahead of schedule. Of the 40 facilities that applied for the compliance incentives, 9 facilities received the deductible waiver for tank upgrades, and 29 facilities received the waiver for spill bucket upgrades. Half of these facilities have received no further action status for the releases that were discovered during the upgrades. Also in 2018, OPS implemented risk-based inspections, and the objective was to focus on the high-risk facilities with the older tank systems and also facilities that have poor compliance or release histories. And the high-risk facilities will be inspected annually as opposed to the lower-risk facilities, which are only going to be inspected every 3 years, which was the previous frequency. And these announced inspections will allow for education of owner-operators that need to improve their compliance history. In 2017, OPS developed an iPad application for performing inspections, and this inspection app was implemented in 2018. This inspection app will increase the inspection efficiency and effectiveness of communication. It'll reduce handoffs, eliminate paperwork, and will instantly communicate the results of the inspection to the tank owner at the site. So this will be an improvement. So moving on to remediation, I just wanted to start by showing a chart of petroleum release trends for the last 10 years. The blue line shows the total number of releases from 2008 was at 1,200, and it has been reduced to about 600 releases at the end of 2018. The red line shows the number of confirmed releases annually, and the green line shows the number of closures annually. And these trends indicate that we are gradually closing more releases than we're opening over time. And this reflects the success of the release prevention program and efforts, better assessment and remediation of confirmed releases, and implementing the Tier 3 and Tier 4 closure criteria. This slide shows a summary of the 4 OPS closure tiers for petroleum releases. OPS utilizes drinking water maximum contaminant levels, or MCLs, as risk-based screening levels, or RBSLs. The Tier 1 closure was created when the program was implemented in 1988. And a Tier 1 closure essentially is when the contaminants of concern meet the Tier 1 RBSLs with no offsite impacts. Tier 2 was adopted in 1999 to allow for on-site degradation to develop site-specific target levels using conservative fate and transport modeling. And Tier 2 is a closure when the contaminants of concern meet the site-specific target levels with no offsite impacts. The Tier 3 and Tier 4 closure criteria were implemented in 2014 for older sites where offsite residual contamination exists, but is deemed to be a low risk based on evaluation of all exposure pathways. This slide summarizes the Tier 3 closure criteria with a block diagram to illustrate a typical Tier 3 closure scenario. OPS requires that all corrective action plans initially are designed for a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 closure. But with older sites that are recalcitrant and difficult to close, we developed a Tier 3 closure, which can be considered for releases that cannot achieve a Tier 1 or Tier 2 closure, with consideration given to risk, feasible technologies, access, and cost. And empirical data, conservative fate and transport modeling, and other lines of evidence must be used to support a Tier 3 closure. This slide shows the Tier 4 closure criteria with a block diagram to illustrate a typical Tier 3 closure scenario. And as with Tier 3, Tier 4 closures may be considered for releases that can achieve a Tier 1 or Tier 2 closure, with consideration given to risk, feasible technologies, access, and cost. And as with the Tier 3 closures, Empirical data, conservative fate and transport modeling, and other lines of evidence must be used to support the Tier 4 closure. This slide just shows the closure tier distribution since 2014 when we implemented the Tier 3 and Tier 4 closure criteria. And since 2014, 90% of all closures have been done as Tier 1 and Tier 2, and the remaining 10% were closed under Tier 3 and Tier 4. This slide just shows the number of Tier 3 and Tier 4 closures over time. Since implementation in 2014, we have closed 130 release events using Tier 3 and Tier 4 closure criteria. So this slide shows our GIS map tool. It's a screenshot of our GIS map tool. And the map tool shows all of the Tier 3, actually it shows all closures that are connected to the Colorado 811 program. And for the Tier 3 and Tier 4 closures, we provide a fact sheet that is linked by a GIS map link. So the information about the Tier 3 or Tier 4 closure is provided to the public or whoever is interested in the Tier 3 closure or Tier 4 closures. So in 2019, OPS is looking for ways to enhance the web-based GIS map tool. As I said, currently the map tool just shows the location of all of the petroleum releases by closure tier with a link to a fact sheet. More GIS layers are being considered to show spatial relationships to other features such as proximity to drinking water sources. And this would include water wells, surface water, and reservoirs. So that's one of the enhancements we're looking to add to the GIS map tool. Another accomplishment in the remediation program was the development and implementation of the Recognized Environmental Professional Program, or the REP program. The REP program replaced individual listed consultants on January 1st, 2018. And the purpose of the REP program is to better align decision-making responsibility between OPS responsible parties and their environmental consultants. And the definition of a rep is an individual who has the education, training, and experience to be qualified as a principal decision maker on work related to assessment and remediation of petroleum release events. This slide shows that the three primary objectives of the REP program is to align responsibility, build trusting relationships, and raise performance expectations. So to become a recognized environmental professional, there's two primary components that you have to complete. The first one is to submit an application for approval. And the primary elements of the application are to have an appropriate degree in engineering or science or something applicable to doing assessment or remediation, to have at least 5 years of decision-making experience, which needs to be demonstrated in the application, to have at least 8 years of total professional experience, also which needs to be demonstrated in the application, answering a series of professional ethics questions, and to provide 3 references with at least one of them being a client reference. So once an applicant has their application approved, they are allowed to take the rep exam, which is an online exam that must be have a score of 80% or above. And the test is comprised of 50 questions of compliance, remediation, and petroleum storage tank regulations and guidance. So during the 2017-2018, during the application process for the rep in 2018, we received 98 applications, and 71 applications were approved, and of those that were approved, 70 applicants passed the rep exam. So currently we have 70 recognized environmental professionals. And for comparison, we went from over 500 listed consultants which was the previous program, to the rep. So we went from 500 in 2016 to 70 reps, which is the current number of reps we have. An important component of the rep program is continuing education, and we require that all reps complete 24 hours of continuing education to become recertified in 2021. Half of these professional development hours must include the 2 required OPS rep training courses, which include hands-on group exercises. These 2 courses include the Conceptual Site Model Development course, which is worth 7 credits, and the other course is Effective Corrective Action Plan Preparation, which is worth 5 credits. The other 12 hours must be obtained from external sources through technical webinars, workshops, short courses, and conferences in subject matter that is relevant to assessment and remediation. This slide shows the course content for the 2 required rep courses that OPS provides. To date, OPS has given the Corrective Action Plan course 3 times to a total of 90 attendees, and the Conceptual Site Model course has been given twice with a total of 63 attendees. And we will provide both of these courses once in 2019 and also once in 2020. So in addition to reps, consultants are taking advantage of these OPS training courses and sending junior staff for the training. And we don't charge anything for the course, so it's a free training course, both of these. So looking forward to goals in 2019, the first goal is to get our formal state program approval from EPA. We've already received the completeness approval for the state program, and we're just awaiting the formal approval, which is pending public comment by EPA. Another goal is to revise the petroleum storage tank regulations this year to include tank installation requirements, qualified service technician requirements, monthly inspections of under dispenser and tank top sumps, and reimbursement of costs for tank removals. And the reimbursement of costs for tank removals, the objective there is to try to get some of these high-risk tank systems replaced and either permanently removed, if not replaced, with the upgraded equipment required by EPA in the 2020 regulations. We're also going to continue to enhance the online guidance, the map tool, and applications, and also continue to implement the REP program. And as always, our overarching goal is to influence compliance through education. And we're scheduled to do outreach in summer of 2019 to influence compliance through education. And we have 4 locations throughout the state where we're going to be providing these outreach presentations. Thanks, and if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer.
Thanks, Rob. Questions?
So I think the numbers you used were around 500 previously listed consultants versus 70 reps now. Do you see any challenges there as far as enough qualified people to get the work done, or are they kind of separate?
No, we don't really see a challenge there. Right now, we have 8 state lead contractors, which pretty much represent almost 90% of the consultants for the work we have already. So we don't see that a problem at all. The 70 reps represents at least those 8 state lead contractors that we use.
Other questions? Yes, Patrick.
Thanks for coming over and thanks for the presentation. Hopefully Mahesh isn't somewhere warm as opposed to where we're at. I just had a question about the GIS work that you all are doing, and actually this may be even more for my staff than you guys, but I'd like to know from your perspective. Does that data, do we correlate that somehow with water quality data? I know we have some GIS mapping that we do. Is there any overlay of the work that you do with what we have? Like what I'm thinking of is our SWAP program, source water protection program, and what we have with that, and whether or not that overlays with the data that you have.
Well, right now we don't, but we're in the process of pursuing that. And that was, one of the goals of this year is to add more layers, and we just need to interface with the other state agencies so we can share our layers and, provide a more robust opportunity for the public to get that information.
I think that would be great. And whatever support you need from the division, we'll certainly support that. And I think it'd be good to have a comprehensive map that overlays all those data layers. Of course, we're going to be hearing from other folks as well, but maybe even something that, overlays with their data.
Yeah, we agree. That's a great idea, and we hope we can achieve that in the near future.
Cool. Thank you.
On the same vein, I think working with the Water Quality Control Division on the mapping is something that should be done. I also think with the Division of Water Resources, the State Engineer's Office has mapping of all the wells in the state. So to me, it would make sense over time that if you map a potential spill that's tier 3 or tier 4, you can automatically notify the State Engineer's Office and the Water Quality Control Division so that people can deal with potential risks very quickly instead of finding out about a month later.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And actually, one of the requirements of our site characterization reports, which is for every release, they need to provide a receptor survey, which includes any drinking water wells or any surface water bodies that are used that have drinking water intakes. So we sort of have that covered, but it would be much better with the GIS app.
Other questions? Other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have the department's Hazardous Materials and Waste Management Division. Good morning.
Yeah. I do have, good morning. I am Jennifer Opila. I'm the fairly new Division Director for the Hazardous Materials and Waste Management Division. I do have a whole host of technical experts behind me to answer all of your questions, but I'm just going to go over our report to the Commission on our activities under SB 181. Oh, yes, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, and I had a whole day to get over it, so it's okay. All right, so we have 4 major programs that fall within the scope of the SB 181 activities: the Hazardous Waste Program, the Remediation Program, the Radiation Program, and the Solid Waste Program. These programs have sites where releases have impacted groundwater quality and where our decisions and actions concerning water quality classifications and standards have established cleanup criteria. There are numerous other examples not chosen for including in the report where the state water quality standards have been used to determine the need for further site investigations or remediation to address chemical releases to soil, groundwater, or surface water. I'll start with the Hazardous Waste Program. No major changes have been made at the Hazardous Waste Program over the last year. The program is continuing to require groundwater at hazardous waste sites to be remediated to applicable state groundwater standards, while evaluating some low-risk sites with low-level residual groundwater contamination under the division's conditional closure policy and guidance. Although the conditional closure policy and guidance have been in effect since 2014, only 5 conditional closure requests have been approved by the program. The Hazardous Waste Program is currently involved in the remediation of approximately 200 hazardous waste sites in Colorado, the vast majority of which include impacts to groundwater. Over the past year, the Hazardous Waste Program approved the final remediation and closure of 8 hazardous waste sites. All 8 of these hazardous waste sites involved remediating contaminated groundwater. One of these 8 sites, Colorado Crystal, which is described in the report, was closed with groundwater contamination exceeding the Water Quality Control Division's Regulation 41 standards in accordance with our conditional closure policy and guidance, while the other 7 sites with groundwater issues were remediated below Regulation 41 standards. Next, I'll speak about the remediation program. The remediation program oversees the remediation of a number of sites with groundwater impacts under the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, also known as CERCLA or Superfund. The remediation program continues to rely on water quality regulations issued by the Water Quality Control Commission as part of the remedy selection and implementation process. In some cases, cleanup is unable to attain water quality standards due to either technology limitations or naturally occurring or non-attributable sources of contamination. In these instances, the remediation program can pursue one of 2 strategies. One strategy is to work with the Water Quality Control Division to propose a site-specific standard, and the other strategy is to employ the Technical Impracticability or TI waiver available under CERCLA. The report provided you with details of a number of Superfund projects that we have been working on this year, and I would like to highlight a few accomplishments. We are evaluating an innovative remedy involving in situ neutralization at the Captain Jack Mine in Boulder County. We continue to successfully operate 3 water treatment plants at Argo, North Clear Creek, and Summitville. And we finalized a new record of decision for Eagle Mine that will result in treatment of contaminated groundwater near Belden. Also in the report is information regarding the pending change from a Colorado Discharge Permit System general permit to a Permit Equivalent Document or PED for the Eagle Mine Water Treatment Plant. The PED contains key procedural elements, standards, and requirements from the Colorado Discharge Permit System general permit to create an enforceable arsenic limit for the treatment plant discharge. The voluntary cleanup and redevelopment staff within the remediation program continue to encounter issues related to surface and groundwater contamination. The staff works closely with the Water Quality Control Division on each site-specific decision to assure compliance with the appropriate regulations. Since these sites are most often the subject of real estate transactions, the buyers and sellers try to ensure that the cost of cleanup does not make economics of the deal unfeasible. Therefore, most cleanup plans focus on source control or removal rather than treatment of contaminated groundwater plumes. The voluntary cleanup staff strive to assure that groundwater standards are met at the property boundary. For sites where this is not achievable, our division policy allows applicants to apply to the Water Quality Control Commission for a variance or a site-specific standard. In some cases, our division will consider an alternate point of compliance, providing that the applicant can demonstrate that there is no current or future exposure risk. Now that I've spoken about the hazardous waste and remediation programs, there is one issue that cuts across both programs, and that's the recent discovery of per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances in groundwater and drinking water in the state of Colorado, specifically PFAS and PFOA. The hazardous waste program added PFAS and PFOA to the Appendix 8 list of regulated hazardous constituents in April of 2018. Through this listing, the hazardous waste program will be able to require sites performing corrective actions for hazardous waste releases to also evaluate the nature and extent of PFAS and PFOA that may have been released due to site operations. To date, groundwater investigation proposals have been requested from about 15 hazardous waste sites to screen for the presence of PFAS and PFOA. The Federal Facilities Unit within the remediation program has taken a lead role in working with the communities of Security, Widefield, and Fountain, as well as the U.S. Air Force at Peterson Air Force Base to address PFAS and PFOA contamination in public drinking water supplies. In addition to the ongoing CERCLA investigation, drinking water mitigation measures have been installed for the affected public water systems. At this time, water being served by each of the affected systems is below the May 2016 EPA health advisory levels. Furthermore, the Air Force recently entered into environmental services agreements with the affected public water supplies to assist with operation and maintenance of the mitigation measures already installed, to procure water from alternate resources to compensate for lost groundwater, and to analyze longer-term solutions, including redundancy in the systems. For private well owners whose wells tested above the EPA health advisory levels, the Air Force has installed reverse osmosis units and continues to maintain those systems. Also, the Air Force continues to sample additional private wells in the affected area as requested. Additionally, our division proposed a site-specific groundwater standard applying only to the area in El Paso County where drinking water sources are known to have been affected by PFOA and PFAS contamination. The proposed standard was 70 parts per trillion for combined PFAS and PFOA, consistent with the EPA's health advisory levels. The division performed extensive public and stakeholder outreach associated with the site-specific standard rulemaking process. At the April 9th, 2018 rulemaking hearing, this commission voted unanimously to adopt the site-specific standard as proposed by our division. The site-specific PFAS and PFOA standard of 70 parts per trillion became effective on June 30th, 2018. Now, a few words about the radiation program. The radiation program in part regulates the operational activities and cleanup of the current and former uranium processing and disposal facilities. It works to isolate the radioactive and heavy metal wastes and byproducts produced in Colorado from the public and the environment. This program works in conjunction with the remediation programs in the division and implements the water quality regulations for surface and groundwater at those sites. The division's SB 181 report includes details on 2 historic uranium facilities where groundwater contamination is being remediated or where institutional controls are being established for residual contamination. And finally, the Solid Waste and Materials Management Program. The Solid Waste and Materials Management Program, bless you, continues to implement water quality standards and classifications in remedial cleanup actions, enforcement actions, and design and operation reviews for new and existing facilities. The Solid Waste and Materials Management Program has been working with the Water Quality Control Division staff for the last several years to define areas of potential overlap of regulatory authority and to delineate program implementation strategies for these areas. This work has led to several work products. One is draft changes to the July 2008 Memorandum of Agreement between the Water Quality Control Division, this commission, and the Hazardous Materials and Waste Management Division. These changes are being brought to you today for consideration. Secondly, a draft Table A that will become an addendum to the Memorandum of Agreement, which describes specific areas of potential program overlap and how they will be handled. And third, a Water Quality Control Division policy on permitting of land application, which is in development within the division. In summary, the major changes for areas of program overlap are limited to 2 areas. First, because of the wording within SB 181, the Water Quality Control Division has determined that they will no longer permit land application of solid waste liquids. In the past, the Solid Waste Program implemented regulatory control of land application of solid waste liquids where the application rate was less than the evapotranspiration rate. And the Water Quality Control Division permitted those land applications of solid waste liquids at rates that were greater than the evapotranspiration rate as a groundwater discharge. Going forward, the solid waste program will continue to oversee land application of solid waste liquids at rates less than the evapotranspiration rate. But since the Water Quality Control Division will no longer regulate land application of solid waste liquids at all, application of solid waste liquids at rates higher than the evapotranspiration rate will not be allowed. The second change is in regard to Type A solid waste surface impoundments. The Water Quality Control Division will assume regulatory control over all Type A solid waste surface impoundments that are hydrogeologically connected to surface water. Most of these impoundments are parts of water treatment facilities that are already fully regulated by the Water Quality Control Division, and Type A impoundments contain very low-risk waste. So this concludes my briefing. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions or regarding our report or the MOU.
Thank you. Questions for Jennifer or staff? Fred?
Thanks for that report. I didn't see it in the report, but I was just wondering, when you inherit a operating responsibility for a water plant, for mine waste, et cetera, where does the funding come from for that, both the operating side and capital?
When we inherit a facility?
You know, I thought if Gold King, for instance, you're going to, it's going to give responsibility for that at some day or whatever.
Yeah, so you're talking about water treatment plants that are part of Circular Remedies?
Yes.
So the way that works is that we pay for 10%, and then the EPA pays for 90% over a certain period of time, and then that ends up switching over to where we end up with 100%, as you were saying, and that money comes from the state superfund. So we have a fund for state superfund activities. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
I just had a question about sites where you have issues meeting the underlying standard due to natural sources, and what the most common pollutants are. It sounds like arsenic is one, looks like aluminum is one at least one site, but I wondered if you could comment on where you're running into natural source related compliance issues with the underlying standards.
Who wants to take that one? Doug?
Oh, you should have just done it there. I can do it from here. I'll try to speak up.
Sorry, you can't visit
the stream. Sure. Good morning. I'm Doug Jamison. I'm the Superfund and Brownfields Unit Leader within the Hazardous Materials Division Remediation Program. So often at Superfund sites, we run into an issue where cleanup activities due to background concentrations or other non-point sources, we are unable to achieve through cleanup the water quality standards. As the report highlights, there are usually one of two strategies that we employ when we run into this situation. The first strategy would be to, complete as much work as we think we can under Superfund and then pursue a site-specific standard. We can do that with a use attainability analysis in some cases. In other cases, we've tried to do it without. More recently, EPA's water quality folks have they've balked at allowing a site-specific standard, saying that would inhibit future water quality improvements through the 319 program or other funding sources. So we can also use, CERCLA has several waivers for attainment of standards or applicable requirements in the law. And we look at what we call a technical impracticability waiver. And that's basically just a process where you go through something that would be similar to an attainability analysis and determine that you are technically unable to meet the standard. In this case, it would be the water quality standards. And so you waive it and set an alternate remediation goal, which we have recently done at Eagle for arsenic.
So thank you for that explanation. I guess my question is oriented to what are you seeing as the most common issues? Arsenic is one. Are there other metals?
There are other metals.
Or just site specific?
Most specifically, we see it at mining sites because, the Colorado Mineral Belt is a world-class ore body that extends through much of the state. And so we see
high background concentrations of various metals, not only arsenic. Zinc is an issue in some places, cadmium, copper. There it becomes site-specific.
Jennifer, I wonder where you're at with the efforts to develop standards for T-norm for water and wastewater treatment plant residuals.
So for those of you who may not know, T-norm stands for Technologically Enhanced Naturally Occurring Radioactive Materials. The department received authority over, or received authorization to promulgate regulations for management of T-norm residuals, which happen when you take naturally occurring radioactive materials out of water, for example. We have hired, the same bill that gave us that authority required us to produce a report regarding a number of issues with T-norm, including background information and what's being done in other states. We've hired a consultant to work on that report, and we are expecting a draft in March. And then we will be opening a stakeholder process to look at the report, as well as to talk with stakeholders about development of those regulations. We are required to present the report to the state legislature at the end of this year, and we are required to promulgate regulations by the end of next year.
Other questions? Joan?
Thank you. Hi, thanks for the presentation. The new proposed or intended policy regarding land application of liquid wastes. What's the sort of plan for that, the schedule, and how many facilities do you think will be affected by that?
Is that from Meg or Greg?
Only Meg.
Okay. So we put that we put that policy out for public comment in early December, or actually I think November 27th. The deadline for public comment was December 27th. We did not receive any public comments on it. So we'll be moving forward pending. I think we wanted to wait on that policy to see what action you all wanted to take with regard to the MOU. But if the commission approves kind of this path forward, we'll be taking steps to finalize that policy in the coming month. There are only 2 individual permits that we know of at this time that will be affected. Both are administratively continued. We specifically reached out to those permittees to see if they had comments on the policy. We didn't receive comments from them, but we'll be working with Jennifer's team to coordinate for those individual permittees. And then for general permittees, per the policy, under general permits, we'll be continuing to issue certs for those discharges of solid waste solely to groundwater. But when we renew those general permits, at that point, when we have sort of the public comment and all that kind of process, that's when we'll be taking out the piece where we're permitting these discharges of solid waste solely to groundwater.
Other questions? Patrick?
And actually, Meg, while you're still there as well, Jen, you'd mentioned in the MOU, anything above ET for land application won't be regulated by this, but actually they'll have to apply for a groundwater discharge permit, right?
No. So
that I was confused about.
So that's the policy. That's sort of been what has been the policy now. The idea being that if it's above ET, there's going to be a discharge to groundwater. So that's still a solid waste. So Water Quality Control Division, without action from the commission per SB 181, doesn't have the authority to permit that discharge to groundwater.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was confused about that. I know you've explained it to me like 3 or 4 times now.
No, it is incredibly confusing, and yeah, and we don't think that this is going to be a change that will have a sort of a large practical impact on folks in the state, but
sure. But again, those just won't be allowed effectively, right?
Correct.
Great. Thank you.
Anything else? Jennifer, it seems that 2 or 3 times a year, staff from your division come and make presentations to us, and they've always been very helpful and very knowledgeable. So we appreciate that cooperation.
Absolutely. Anything that we can do for you guys, just let us know.
We have a draft MOU. Is there a motion to approve the MOU or any questions or concerns?
I move approval of the MOU.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Joan and a second by Barbara to approve the MOU as presented. Would you like to say something? Oh, you're taking a deep breath. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries and the MOU is approved. Thank you, Jennifer. Do we want a quick break? Okay. We'll take about a 10-minute break.